Hi, and welcome to Primavera Online School Financial Math class. I am Mrs. Nelson, adjunct teacher with Primavera, and I'm going to be running you through your session videos. So, your Unit 1 session is going to be all about tax brackets, determining taxable income and taxes owed. By the end of this lesson, we will understand a little bit better about how tax brackets work and how to calculate our taxable income on a very basic level, and how to calculate taxes owed on a very basic level. So this is just an introduction into how tax brackets work. How many of you have heard people in the certain tax bracket pay more in taxes and all of those kinds of things, or they pay less in taxes, and there's lots of controversy over how much people are paying in taxes. So I thought this would be a great video to help illustrate how this actually works. So with that being said, please understand that this is going to be only looking at single taxpayers. So just for the purpose of illustration, we're only going to be looking at single taxpayers. The reason for this is just not to overcomplicate things. I just want to introduce the idea and to help explain it in that sense. So, the way that I like to think of tax brackets is as pockets, okay? A tax bracket only taxes certain amounts of your income at those certain levels. So because of this, you can think of tax brackets as pockets that can only hold so much money. So this is the example of tax brackets for 2024. So we are currently in the year 2024, which means we will not be paying taxes for this year until next year. So they already have the bracket set up. The 10% tax bracket is any income up to $11,600. The 12% tax bracket is the income over that up to $47,150. So these are cumulative amounts, okay? It's not this fills up and then I start over from 0 to 47. No, it doesn't work like that. So once your income goes into this 10% pocket, that income is not taxed again. So we don't want to double dip. And so because of that, it can be a little bit tricky to calculate how much tax you're actually paying, which is the purpose of this lesson. So just to do a quick example, if your taxable income is $12,000 per year as a single person, $11,600 of your income would be taxed at 10%, and the remaining income would be taxed at 12%. So let's just take a look at that really quickly. So if I make $12,000 per year, I am going to take away the $11,600 that is taxed in the 10% bracket, and I'm left with $400. So what this really means, I'm going to grab a quick text box here. What this really means is in the 10% bracket there, $11,600, I'm going to put a dollar sign because whenever we're doing anything in financial math, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be money, but it's not always money. So I need to know that you know it's money. So it's really important that when it is money that you give me a dollar sign, and the dollar sign always goes in the front of the number or the very first character on the left-hand side. Okay? So $11,600 of my income is going to go in this 10% bracket, right? Now, that means in the 12% bracket, the remaining $400 would go there, okay? So that begs the question of how much are you actually paying in taxes? Are you paying 12% of $12,000? No, you are paying 10% of $11,600 and 12% of $400. You would add those two numbers together, and that would tell you how much you're actually paying in taxes total. Okay? Now, how do we figure out how much we're paying in taxes? Well, we can do that by multiplying by the percent as a decimal. So, how do I convert a percent to a decimal? Well, best way I can tell you is we're going to multiply. So we multiply 11,600 by 10% as a decimal, but how do I convert it? If ever you're in doubt, the easiest way to convert a percent to a decimal is going to be to take the percent and divide it by 100. That will guarantee that you get the right decimal. So, that being said, we're going to take 10% and divide it by 100. I get 0.1. I like to think of it as 0.10 just because it helps me connect. Like 0.10 is 10% as a decimal. Okay, so now that I've got my percent as a decimal, I'm going to multiply by 11,600. So this person is going to pay $1,160 in taxes. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of go like this, and we're just going to make a note of that. So that is 1,160. I know you can't see that, in taxes. I'm going to move this box. There we go. We'll just move it down here. Maybe. There it goes. Oh, that's even worse to see. There we go. That's more better. Okay. So we've got 11,600 in income. That's going to be $1,160 in tax. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing, but with the 12% pocket now. So I'm going to pull my calculator back up. I'm going to clear it out. So I'm going to take 12%. I'm going to divide it by 100. That's going to convert it to my decimal. So now I've got 0.12. Now I'm going to multiply by 400. There we go, $48. So the $400 income, oops, I would be required to pay $48 in tax. Okay, so altogether, we would just take 1,160 and add 48 to it, and that would be how much this person ends up paying in taxes. Okay, so that's just one quick example. Let's move on to the next. Before you take any taxes, you have to take the standard deduction. Okay, now there's lots of different deductions in the world of taxes. We're not going to worry about that for right now. We're just going to focus on the standard deduction because that's the deduction that everybody takes. All right, so there are ways to itemize your deductions, and sometimes if you itemize, you can get a little bit more in deduction, but for the most part, most people don't have enough itemized deductions that exceed the standard deduction, and you get the higher of the two. So most people just choose to take the standard deduction because it's quicker, it's easier, and requires less paperwork. So for single filers, that amount for 2024 is $14,600. Now, this is a higher number than it was for 2023, and this number changes almost every year because of inflation. Now, how do we take the standard deduction? You are going to subtract the standard deduction from your income before you start calculating your taxes. So the standard deduction is a natural tax break for everybody. So nobody really pays all of the taxes on all of their income. Everybody gets this standard deduction to lower what their taxable income is and then pay taxes on what's left over. So, quick example 2. If you made $50,000 before taxes, you would subtract $14,600 from that to determine your taxable income. So let's do that right now. Let me clear out my calculator. So $50,000, we're going to take away the standard deduction of $14,600, and I get $35,400. So that is how much this person would actually have to pay taxes on, not the full $50,000. Okay? So next what we're going to do is take a look at all of this in action. Okay? So we're going to start with an income of $65,000. We're not going to forget the standard deduction. Okay, so let's go ahead and just take care of that right out the gate. Let's go ahead and clear this out. Take $65,000 of income and subtract $14,600, and we get $50,400. So I'm going to grab a quick text box and we're going to jot this down. So my income, my taxable income is $ because it's money, $50,400. Okay, so I've got that. Now, you may have noticed that I put some boxes over the first numbers in these little tax income bracket ranges. The reason why I did that is because when we are hand calculating our taxes, I don't want to pay attention to these numbers. These numbers just tell me what the lowest value is in each of these brackets or pockets, and I'm only concerned about what the highest number is, okay? And you'll see what I mean in just a second. All right, so next what we want to do is start taxing our income. So my taxable income is $50,400. So what I'm going to do is, hypothetically speaking, not hypothetically, but figuratively speaking, I'm going to take my money and put it into the first tax bracket, okay? That pocket will only hold $11,600 of my income, okay? So we actually already figured out that number, didn't we? Let me pull up my calculator. Let's look at the history. So yes, right here, we took 10% of $11,600. It came out to be $1,160. So once you figure out the maximum taxes in each bracket, you don't have to do the math again, which is kind of nice. All right, so let's go ahead and jot this down really quick. I'm going to grab a quick text box, and we're going to type in 1,160 in tax, and I'm going to put that right here. There we go. So that's the first bracket, okay? Now, the 12% bracket fills up at $47,150. Oh, so Miss Nelson, would I take $47,150 and multiply it by 12%? You might think so, but here's the kicker. We already taxed $11,600 of that income. Do you really want to have to pay double taxes on that income? No, nobody does. So we're going to subtract $11,600 from $47,150 to find out how much is actually in this pocket. So let's go ahead and do that really quick. I'm going to clear this. So I'm going to take $47,150 and I'm going to subtract $11,600. And I get $35,550. So that's the actual amount of the income that is being taxed at 12%. Okay? So that being said, we already know from the previous examples that 12% as a decimal is 0.12. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to multiply by 0.12. And I owe $4,266 in tax. So I'm going to make a note of that. I owe $4,266 in tax at the 12% level. Okay? So I'm just going to move that right about there. I know it's a little bit confusing, I'm sorry. So we have to pay $1,160 in tax for the 10% bracket. We have to pay $4,266 in tax for the 12% bracket. Well, wait, Ms. Nelson, how did you know that your income was going to fill up that pocket? Well, my income is $50,400, and that is greater than $47,150. So that's how I knew that I had enough income to fill up that pocket. Okay, but if you look at the next pocket, the top of this, like the maximum income that can fit up to here, is $100,525. So I'm going to run out of money to tax at this point. So how do I figure out what I have left over? Well, $11,600 of my income is here, and then I have $35,550 of income here, which totals $47,150. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We are going to subtract $50,400 and $47,150, and that's going to be how we're going to figure out how much money is being taxed at 22%. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. $50,400, I'm going to take away the $47,150 that I have already paid taxes on, because again, I don't want to have to pay double or triple taxes, okay? So that leaves me with $3,250 left of my income, okay? It's being taxed at 22%. Now you may have noticed when we figured out the other percentages, 10% turned into 0.10, 12% turned into 0.12, 12. So if you had to take a guess, what do you think 22% is as a decimal? And if you're saying 0.22, you are correct. So we are going to multiply by 0.22, and I have to pay $715 in taxes. So $715 in tax. Okay, and that is for the 22% bracket right there. Okay, so how do I figure out how much tax I paid altogether? Well, altogether means add it up. So let's do that. We are going to add up 715, I already have that there, plus the 4,266 plus the 1,160. There we go. So this person is required to pay $6,141 in taxes altogether. Okay, so hopefully you have found this video very informative, and now it's your turn. So go ahead and complete Unit 1 session quiz, and this video will also be in the quiz for you to reference. Thanks, have a great day.